reached a human crisis unlike any that we've experienced in the last 75 years.
Any one side has too much, the other side will oppose it.
We've done a lot of things to create the imbalances that we have today.
COVID-19 has laid bare the systemic social inequities. Addressing these larger problems must become our priority.
We have to make sure that the economy actually works for the people.
It's not just about growth for growth's sake, but how we share that prosperity.
It is not sustainability or profit, it is profit through sustainability.
We have to reskill our people to be successful, and if they're more prosperous, the companies are going to be more prosperous.
The most important tools are education and technology.
Technology creates opportunities so that people are able to move to greener industries.
It's not about not knowing that we are in a climate emergency. It's about choosing to take action.
For that, you need to act decisively in the support of renewable energy.
The science is very clear today that the sustainable path is more attractive.
We can focus on the short-term benefit, or we can look further to solve bigger issues.
We need unprecedented collaboration to create systemic change.
It means redesigning the instruments we currently have
on a completely different trajectory, and that doesn't leave anybody behind.
We are one community, and we have to remember that.
Panelists at an Associated Press debate in Davos focused on the need to train the young and reskill those whose jobs have been wiped out by the recession. Nobel Prize-winning economist Joseph Stiglitz, a professor at Columbia University, says jobs lost in the downturn might return, but only if there's a switch in emphasis on how to create them.
The curious thing is that under the current regime, we have incentives directed the wrong direction. We are destroying jobs, incentives to robotize when we have massive unemployment, rather than incentives to save the planet, green, renewable jobs.
U.S. House Majority Leader Eric Cantor says the question is,
how can we manage costs, help drive down costs at the same time, mutually go in and create an environment for more jobs? And I think it comes back down to innovation, opportunity, creating and employing the right incentives.
Italian Finance Minister Vittorio Grilli warned the process will take time.
But this is a slow process, and it's going to be a painful one, because the government has to readdress a lot of issues, and the private sector has to readdress a lot of issues that involve people changing their lives.
The AP Jobs debate took place Friday as part of a wider brainstorming by world leaders on how to stimulate a fiscal recovery and create a greater global employment. Adam Pemble, Associated Press, Davos, Switzerland.
Every day, there are more than 4,000 ransomware attacks. That's where criminals take control of your computer system and don't let you back in until you pay them a ransom. And that ransom is often paid in Bitcoin. How many times have we woken up to headlines about massive hacking attacks that reveal the personal information of just about everybody? We've heard about these attacks and data breaches, but they rarely have national security impact until now. The Colonial Pipeline attack is different. It has shut down the supply line of 45% of the heating oil, jet fuel and gasoline supplies for the northeastern United States. The pipeline is still closed. A regional emergency has been declared from Texas all the way up to New England because the supply of energy has been directly threatened. An outfit known as the Dark Side is reportedly responsible. Don't know much about them, don't know what they're demanding, or whether any ransom has been paid or even negotiated. But what we do know is this. Somebody has enough knowledge of our computer systems to shut down a big chunk of America's energy infrastructure. In fact, somebody knows enough about our computers to shut down any industry. Now that's a threat. Who's doing this? The authorities either don't know or won't say. But when we do find out, and we will, what will we do? I guess it depends on how we characterize the Colonial Pipeline attack. If it drags on and cripples part of our economy, it could surely be called an act of war and would require a proportionate warlike response. Seems like we're almost there, doesn't it? The second hour of Varney & Company is about to begin.
But first, we start tonight with Joe Biden projecting weakness on the world stage. Frankly, it's an embarrassment. And America's enemies, they are taking note tonight. From cyber attacks to proxy wars, you have an alliance that has emerged with Iran and Russia and China. Yep, all ramping up their malignant activity. On Friday, the largest oil pipeline network in the U.S. was shut down because of this cyber attack, reportedly linked to Hillary's favorite country of Russia. This pipeline transports nearly 50% of all gas consumed on the east coast of this country, and that's including fuel that is used at our military bases. So make no mistake, this was a major attack. And not only are gas prices already skyrocketing, they will go higher. Now gas stations, we can report at this hour, they're actually starting to run out of fuel, and our military was also impacted. So the pressing question of the night, Joe, how will you respond? My guess is they will do absolutely nothing. Well, you might want to call Hunter. He got the $3.5 million deal with the First Lady of Moscow, the wired money from the Russian oligarch. And after all, Joe Biden is doing very little. We also have China's military, their expansion into the Pacific and the Arctic, even as China is publicly threatening Australia with a long-range missile attack and a strike. And in February, Joe rewarded Iran, we told you about this, by ending UN sanctions put into effect by Donald Trump and his administration. And remember, Iran is the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism. And as we speak, the hostile regimes, get this, they continue to fund proxy wars across the region. A few days ago, the U.S. Navy intercepted the ship in the Arabian Sea en route from Iran to Yemen. What was in that ship? It was carrying a massive amount of missiles, grenade launchers, sniper rifles, other Chinese and Russian-made weapons bound for the ongoing proxy war in Yemen against the Saudis. By the way, so that's Russia, that's China, and that's Iran fighting a proxy war against a group we're now aligned with. That would be the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Emirates, Israel, and yes, the Saudis. Who would have thought about that 5 years ago? Earlier today, the terrorist group Hamas, backed by Iran, in their charter, they call for the destruction of Israel. They launched a rocket attack on the holy city of Jerusalem. This hours later, Israel responded with force. They attacked Hamas targets in Gaza. And following the strikes, the Israeli embassy in the U.S. tweeted, quote, "Imagine if a terrorist group was firing rockets at Washington, D.C. or London. Imagine the people of Paris or Tokyo running into bomb shelters. Israel will defend itself from attacks on its capital." Now, Joe Biden, he needs to decide. Are you going to defend Israel, Joe?
The wild card to me is that there is actually a deal to be done among the central banks and governments to basically have XRP work as the world's bridge currency, a neutral asset that could be traded between the central banks to move a specific type of fiat to another type of fiat. If that's what occurs, it's back to what we were discussing earlier. It's got to cover kind of all the money. And I think you're looking at a range that XRP would settle on agreement. So this would happen instantaneously, somewhere between $10,000 and $35,000 a coin. And our lives will be, maybe the same, maybe different. I don't know.
Greetings, citizens of the world. This is a message from Anonymous for the World Health Organization. It is widely believed that you are a group that truly seeks to maintain the best public health around the world, but in the past few months, it has become apparent that you are more of a political organization than a public service. In fact, your allegiance to the governments that support you through massive financial donations has put the world in grave danger. The organization that you belong to has a very important responsibility, because it is trusted by most of the world for credible information. You are seen as the utmost authority on health information, and act as the arbiter of truth for up-to-date science on emerging diseases. Most media broadcasters, politicians, and health officials around the world have looked to your press releases and news conferences for the most up-to-date scientific information on the growing COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, and you failed miserably in your duty to protect the people. Your response to this virus has been a day late and a dollar short, every step of the way, beginning with your refusal to admit in the early stages of the outbreak that human-to-human transmission was taking place, when this fact was obvious to scientists and journalists around the world who were following the story and keeping up with the studies as they were being published. At the time, the Chinese government was doing its best to downplay the severity of the outbreak, and the World Health Organization acted as their mouthpiece, reporting whatever Chinese authorities told them to. As a result of this guidance, the entire world did not take the threat seriously, because everyone assumed that the World Health Organization could be trusted. Members of the World Health Organization also took months before finally declaring the coronavirus a global pandemic. During press conferences in recent months, representatives of the organization insisted that they wanted to avoid declaring a pandemic prematurely because they didn't want to scare anyone or create a panic. However, scientific findings have since shown that we were already dealing with a global pandemic by the time that Chinese authorities decided to quarantine Wuhan, because the genetics of the virus has been traced back to at least October or November 2019.
What we see are epidemics in different parts of the world, affecting countries in different ways and requiring a tailored response. The sudden increase in new cases is certainly very concerning. I have spoken consistently about the need for facts, not fear. Using the word pandemic now does not fit the facts, but it may certainly cause fear.
For the past several months you have insisted that this virus was not airborne, despite significant evidence, including multiple scientific studies suggesting that this was the case. Now that the whole world is in lockdown, you have finally admitted that this virus can be transmitted through the air, despite the fact that numerous scientific studies since January have confirmed this to be the case. The general population has been getting a very confusing message, and very bad advice, thanks to these conflicting reports, and the murky definition for airborne, that is being used by health officials. Since this virus is spread through the air, and can remain in the air for up to 3 hours, the use of N95 masks is very important in stopping the spread of the illness. Unfortunately, the United States and other undeveloped countries were caught off guard by the pandemic and are not prepared with enough proper protective equipment for medical health professionals, meaning that there certainly won't be enough to go around for the general population. The World Health Organization is ignoring the science and the common sense, but masks have been proven to drastically reduce the spread of illnesses like the one we are facing. There are many people in the United States who are learning this fact and are becoming upset about the lies that they have been told, and many of them are suggesting that the World Health Organization is helping the US government prevent panic by downplaying the importance of masks and transmission through the air. Let's not forget that the organization's largest donors are the United States government, the Chinese government, and the Gates Foundation. This is perhaps why WHO officials have refused to recognize Taiwan as a separate entity from China, and why the organization has praised the leadership of both the US and China, despite the fact that both governments have been criticized for their lack of transparency and the heavy-handed tactics that have been used to enforce quarantines. Let's face it, the World Health Organization is corrupt, and is more of a public relations firm for its donors than it is a bastion of public health. The organization does not have a good track record with outbreaks either, and rarely does anything of value to actually help. In 2015, the World Health Organization admitted that they did a bad job at handling the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. In the Ebola outbreak, the organization actually made many of the same mistakes, including waiting too long before declaring a global health emergency, a decision which scientists later said undoubtedly contributed to the unprecedented scale of the outbreak. After the failed response to the Ebola epidemic, the previous Director General was replaced with Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, who is now the face of the organization. Tedros also has a history of corruption, which includes downplaying the severity of a cholera outbreak in Ethiopia when he was the country's health minister between 2005 and 2012. In addition to misleading the world about the severity of the virus, you have also encouraged the draconian measures that governments have taken to enforce quarantines. As the Chinese government was silencing doctors and locking them in quarantine for speaking out, Tedros and others praised its response, and urged other governments around the world to take similar measures. Citizens of other countries, especially those in the Western world, thought that it could never happen in their neighborhood, but most governments seem to be taking the advice of the World Health Organization and have started to implement military-style lockdowns similar to those seen in Wuhan during the early days of the outbreak. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.